Is an online valuation really enough when you're dealing with probate? And this is one of the most commonly asked questions that we get at Swift Values. So I thought I'd run through the answer with you in a video. And hello, welcome. My name's Mark Littler. I was an auctioneer for 10 years and I've been an independent valuer for 10 years. And I set Swift Values up because there's a big problem with trying to get online or trying to get any valuation of chattels or personal possessions for probate. So we made the system really simple and really easy to use. And one of the biggest misconceptions is the degree of detail that you need for your probate valuation. So let's split this down, because in real terms, there are two types of valuation that you need when somebody dies. The first one is an inheritance tax calculation. So the figure that's used is to calculate what inheritance tax is liable and to help you apply for your grant of probate. The second one would normally be used when you were to sell any of the items, following the dispersal of to help with the dispersal of the estate. Now, I think it's really important to look at what HMRC expects of you, an executor, when you're doing this. And the first thing to note is what is the definition that HMRC use of how you're meant to value the contents, what figures are you meant to use? Well, let's go straight to the horse's mouth. Let's take a look at the Inheritance Tax Act and see exactly what it says. So this is legislation.gov, and this is the Inheritance Tax Act 1984, section 160. And it basically says the price which the property might reasonably be expected to fetch if sold on the open market at that time, but the price should not be assumed to be reduced on the ground that the whole property is to be placed on the market at one and the same time. So basically what it is saying here is that you need the valuation to be the open market value on the day of the death. So they're quite clear with that. So we're not looking at any items that are not commercial. So we're only looking at items that are commercial, and that's important. We'll get back to that in a second. Now, how do HMRC expect you to compile this information together? Because if you're going to get your house valued, you might instruct three different estate agents, or you might pay for a RICS one. But let's see what HMRC or the government themselves say about how you need to take on the process of valuing the chattels. And the best place to look here is on the Gazette, which is the official public record, and it's been there since the 1660s, I believe, the Gazette has been running. So there's this page here, and I'll put a link to this below, how to value a house and its contents for probate. And it says here, what contents do you need to value for probate? And then here, how do you value a contents for probate? So this is exactly what we're looking at here, and this is the important part. Because here it says, if the total value of the contents is expected to be less than £1,500, then you do not need a formal valuation, and a reasonable estimate can be used. However, HMRC do have the right to ask for further details, and so it might be worthwhile taking photos before the property is cleared. So let's just look at that in a little bit of detail, because basically what they're saying is that you don't need a professional valuation. You need to show reasonable care. And this is exactly what our services and the online service is designed for, because how do you know if your contents is worth more or less than £1,500? Because remember, you as the executor are liable for any errors that accrue during the probate process. So our £99 valuation is exactly that. You take pictures of each room, and then a professional valuer will take a look at those pictures and tell you exactly what the house contents is worth. Now, we've looked at the first scenario, the probate valuation, and then the second type of valuation is your sales valuation. So when you're looking for a sales valuation, this is probably when you would need a fully itemized list of all the items in the property and their estimates to maybe help you with dispersals, or to know whether to make a decision whether to sell them or not. The two are completely separate and distinct. HMRC does not require a list of every single item in the property. It only needs to know, and again, let's come back to the Gazette again so that we go straight to the horse's mouth. Let's take a look here. It says, any jewellery worth over £1,500 needs to be itemised, and any antiques, work of art or collections need to be listed separately on the IHT 400 form. Now, again, technically an antique is anything worth anything over 100 years old. So we've tried to challenge this with HMRC in the past, but never got a clear answer. Because if you use the definition of an antique, you might be itemizing an ashtray that's 100 years old with worth 10 pence. But broadly speaking, most valuation companies will use that same £1,500 threshold. And it says here, for the remaining items that do not need to be listed individually, you can ask the valuer to give you a valuation of the whole. Remember to ask for an open market valuation and not a probate valuation, as historically this valuation has discounted the market by 10%. That's exactly right. You don't discount this. You don't try and dodge tax. You value it appropriately at the open market value. So there you go. Right, now let's look at this in next section, sort of like, let's take a look at this, why this matters, and give you a bit of an analogy here. If you were to value a house for probate purposes, you might just go, right, I'm there at the property next Tuesday. Let's get 3 estate agents in. I can be free from 11 till 12. Let's get it done. Done. You've got your valuation. You submit it to HMRC. Now, if you were selling that house, the next time that you call the estate agent, you might say, oh, can we wait for a sunny day? I need to get the gardener in to make the garden look pretty. Oh, we're actually going to renovate. We're going to just repaint some of the walls and we're going to replace some of these carpets just to maximize the sale of the house. You're treating the two completely differently. And it's the same with the chattels. HMRC are only asking for the valuation of the chattels as they're seen to best endeavours. And that's exactly what our online valuations are helping you do. You don't need to go to the extent of calling somebody in to rummage through every single drawer in the chance that they do find something of note inside those drawers. Because we as auctioneers and valuers, the majority, like we deal with, like through my other company, Mark Littler Limited, we might receive 200 email valuations a day for people looking to sell items, and we can accurately value those items and we can get them in and we can generate sales based on those. Email valuations is pretty much how the whole auction industry generates leads now. And when you submit pictures of each room for your online house contents valuation, our valuers will instantly dismiss maybe 80 to 90 to 99% of the contents in the room because they're only honing in on the items that they can see that have commercial value. Because unfortunately, it's not really unfortunately, but when we're dealing with valuations like this, there's no sentiment involved. We don't know the life stories behind all these pieces. We're just doing a tax calculation. We're looking for any commercial items and disregarding the rest. Whereas you might put a big sentimental value on a Chinese or a Japanese tea service that was brought back by your great-great-grandfather, but it's chipped. It's probably worthless. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it has no value. We don't care about the sentiment. We care about the open market. And from images of entire rooms, we can do a very, very accurate job. And you can satisfy HMRC with that report, which is fully illustrated as well. So again, perfectly matches the advice which the Gazette is issuing you. Now, before we close this, then, when do you need to get a valuer in person? Because our Swift Values, our online valuations, house contents are £99. To send a valuer out, it's £249 plus VAT per hour. And in London, that's subject to a 2-hour minimum charge. So it's incredibly expensive to send a valuer out. So why would you do that? Well, a few reasons. One, when you know that the person has been an avid collector of antiques or silver or watches or jewellery, then of course you need to get somebody out to take the care and attention because you know that there's a lot of high value items there. Likewise, if it's a contentious estate or you know that there's likely going to be some fallout or disagreement about the dispersal of items, absolutely, call a valuer out, go and do it. Likewise, if the valuer, you know that there was a collection of rings on the insurance valuation, but you can't find those rings anywhere, well, yeah, you probably do want to spend 1 or 2 hours rummaging through the entire house to try and find 10, 20, 50 or £100,000 worth of items that are missing. So you would use, it's about a proportionate response. If you know that your parents or the deceased had a reasonably middle-class house, reasonably nice furniture, but you know it's not going to be worth much for probate, there's no point in sending an expensive valuer in person. You do your online valuation at £99 plus VAT. And of course, if the valuer does spot something of high value in that, like a nice painting or some silver or whatever, they'll just flag that up and say, look, we believe there might be some nice paintings in here or an expensive collection of silver or watches and things. We can tell you that and we can advise on the appropriate next steps for it. Now, finally, you've got to remember that there is a safety net here. So let's say that you did an online valuation, the contents came to £750 And then when you were selling the items and dividing the property up, you opened a drawer, and at the bottom of the drawer in a sock were 10 sovereigns. Or your jewellery box that nobody knew about. Of course, this is perfectly normal, and this is part and parcel of what happens during the disposal, or sort of like the house clearance aspect of it. And HMRC expects this, and this is why you can submit revisions after subsequent sales. And it's the same reason that if I would likely put a decent wager on this, that if you called 3 estate agents out to your house today, they would give you 3 different valuations of that property. And when it came to market, the offer that you accepted would deviate from their initial valuation. So if you've got a house that's valued at £600,000 and you finally sell it after a bidding war for £632,000, you of course submit that extra £32,000 note to HMRC on a revision, and it's fine, and all the tax is updated. And it's exactly the same process with chattels. If you have an online house contents valuation and then you put everything through auction, and lo and behold, in the back of the cupboard, there was a collection of watches that nobody knew about, or a very interesting print or painting, and it did make £5,000, then you could submit that same revision again. And of course, you've got your paperwork from either the sale or the auction house to act as your evidence of what that was worth. So the key thing is, what we're trying to do here at Swift Values is give you the proportionate response to your situation. If you're just trying to get through probate, we're here to help you. If you've got a very specialist, or, if your parents had a very big collection of 18th century mice and porcelain, we're here to help you. We've got a consultant that can come out and value amazing collections of 18th century mice and porcelain, if you're so lucky to have that. But we're just here. Now, if you've got any questions, we'll put our contact details in the description below. So please get in touch, and any questions or comments, put them below, and I'll respond personally to all of them.